everybody, and welcome to Wrestling Academy. It me, your Sam, self-appointed Homecoming King and teacher's assistant to our very one and only Headmaster Michael Klasek. How you doing, Michael?
I'm doing all right. I shaved my beard. I don't know if anybody could tell. I shaved my beard from the last
can't tell.
episode.
No
And I'll be
change.
honest with you, I had the beard for about a year, real self-conscious to not have it. So luckily, everybody in my life is going to be really cool about it, and it's not going to be a big deal.
Oh yeah, and the internet will absolutely be super forgiving and not be really, really rude about it.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing I'm the most stoked about not having a beard anymore. It's just double chin so pronounced, like the beard was hiding it and nowhere to hide now,
Look, you look great, and I think it's wonderful that your beard is gone, but I also thought it was wonderful when your beard was around.
Thanks. Genuinely,
Hey.
thank you so much.
No problem, man. Can you tell us why we're here in Wrestling Academy?
This
please?
is Wrestling Academy, episode 2. Sammy, how are you feeling to be in the second episode?
I feel really, really good, and we've definitely not done any redos at all, ever.
Yeah, no, this is just straight off the dome, and we're crushing it. So this is Wrestling Academy. It's a podcast for newer fans, people who are trying to get more into it, because I just know from personal experience, wrestling, there's so much of it, and it can be kind of confusing if you're just getting into it, or maybe if you've been away from it for a while and you come back, like a lot of moving parts, a lot of things to keep in mind. And so my favorite thing in the world to do is just get new people into wrestling. And so I want to make it as easy as possible for all my friends. And so me and Sammy, I think you can attest, you're a newer wrestling fan, and I've just been on a personal journey to try to get you more into wrestling, and I would say the speed and enthusiasm of which you've taken to loving wrestling is personally heartening as somebody who's been a lifelong fan.
Yeah. I feel like it was only a matter of time that wrestling fully clicked. I'm glad that you took the time to get me here, and I really don't remember anything that happened to me before wrestling.
It really has, like, every aspect of your life, wrestling has cropped up. I've noticed it, and I recognize myself in you, and it just feels. I would say if you're older and maybe a little bit cynical about wrestling, I truly think the number one way to stay more invested is to help other people get into it, because I truly do get to live through a lot of excitement of when you text me a clip that you're watching, I'd be like, oh my God, they've gotten to the Montreal Screwjob. Oh my God, they're buying wrestling t-shirts, and I get to have that enthusiasm again. So I highly recommend getting everybody super into wrestling. So last week we were talking about the event that made me fall in love with wrestling, the April 12th, 1999 episode of Monday Night Raw. And so today we're going to carry on by talking about the event that got Sammy into wrestling. So we're going to go all the way back to 2022 to cover GCW's Amerikaz Most Wanted.
Amerikaz Most Wanted. December 16th, 2022. That's the first time I watched wrestling live. That's the first time I watched wrestling at all. And yeah, again, my life has changed, and I owe it all to Michael.
Hey, you're welcome. If you're really into wrestling and you're trying to get newer people into wrestling, I would highly recommend taking somebody to a live event. I think that's a lot. It's a lot easier way to get somebody on board, because I think, and Sammy, you can attest, it just has sort of a nice sampler platter of everything that you could potentially encounter into wrestling. So there are a lot of different entry points. So you might see some high flying lucha-based wrestling. You might see some super ultra-violent deathmatch weapons style wrestling. You might just see some goofy over-the-top characters. And there's also just kind of an element of drag performing. So there's just, people throw dollar bills on the stage if you do a good job, It's just it's just a lot of group chanting, a lot of yelling, and it's just a good way to, like, get somebody's energy up. And I can't think of a friend that has been willing to go to wrestling with me that didn't end up at least appreciating having gone.
Right. And I think that GCW, aka Game Changer Wrestling, does really offer that sampler platter that you mentioned. And in a really, they curate their cards very well, I think. And I feel really lucky that Amerikaz Most Wanted was the show that it was, because it was just so entertaining and so easy for me to be like, yes, I do love this very much. Um, Before we get further, Michael, do you want to kind of break down what GCW is?
Yeah, absolutely. So GCW, Game Changer Wrestling, is an independent wrestling promotion. It was originally called Jersey Championship Wrestling back in 1999. They rebranded in 2015 and became Game Changer Wrestling. And I would say they grew to be able to tour outside of doing shows specifically in New Jersey, which is where they were based. And now they do shows truly all over the world. That they have if you're watching a match on, let's say, WWE, for example, if you were to go under the ring and grab a chair and hit your opponent with the chair, you would be disqualified because WWE has rules against using weapons. But in GCW, if you're feeling it, you could just grab a chair, you could grab a door, you can grab a light tube if you want
Oh yeah.
to, or you
Right.
could not use it.
Right. There are matches though, hardcore matches in WWE, right?
Yeah, but it would be like this is a specifically hardcore designated match. But
Got it.
in
Okay.
general, if you're just doing a regular old one person versus one person, that wouldn't necessarily be allowed. In GCW, it just is. And I think this might be a good time to also talk about, because we kind of keep talking about the two because they're different
You
things.
sure.
So
Sure.
let's get into like what is the difference between a major promotion like WWE or AEW or New Japan or something versus an independent promotion. A bigger company like WWE is more or less its own thing. So they have their own exclusive roster of exclusive talent who only appears for WWE. They have their own matches and they have a TV deal so they can present all of that stuff on TV so that consumers can watch it. You know, so that allows them to have, because they know they're going to have the same roster and they know that they're going to be on TV every week, they can tell longer storytelling. They're
Mhm.
long-term storytelling they can get into nuances of character, etc., and they can build to things. An independent promotion, however, is a lot smaller scale, so they don't quite have the same amount of money or resources or production value, so they don't have the ability to necessarily pay a major fee to get wrestlers exclusively. So the way you'll see it work on the independent scene is wrestlers will wrestle for a majority, a whole bunch of independent promotions, and maybe one day, if that's what they want to do with their career, they might be able to catch the attention and then move to one of those major promotions where they work exclusively. But when you're working for one of those major promotions, you might not necessarily work there forever. And so there have been plenty of wrestlers who went to the major promotions, didn't enjoy it, and they really liked being an
Mhm.
independent wrestler. So then they went right back to the indies when their contracts were up. All that to say, the money and the prestige and the exposure is really cool, but it comes with a lot of concessions, right? You
Mhm.
have less control over your character when you're working for a major company because you're under contract. There are writers, there are production teams, there are corporate sponsors, so you might not be
Mhm.
able to say whatever you want on the microphone. They might heavily script those. They might have a major say in what your character is doing for a year straight. They might decide
Mhm.
that your character doesn't need to be on TV for a year straight. And so on the independent scene, there's the guarantee of if you have been booked at a show, you will be able to do the work on your show, and sort of you have the freedom to be your own character. You have a If you have a microphone, you pretty much get to say whatever you want, and as long as you're, operating inside what you've been contracted to do,
Mhm.
the freedom is there. So I think a lot of people enjoy the freedom lifestyle, but I think again, I think being a touring performer of any kind, different venues run things differently, and so maybe those come with all their own pitfalls of, maybe they don't get paid, or maybe the person who's promoting it is not the best, etc.
Sure.
So again, it's like checks and balances, lots of big things.
Yeah, it's like being on a payroll or being versus being freelance. There are things that are cool and things that are bad about both.
Yeah, exactly. And it's almost the exact same almost the exact same thing. And so I guess the last thing I would say about the independent versus major company thing is a lot of the wrestlers that are really popular on the big companies started out in the indies, especially in the era we're in right now. So
Right.
Seth Rollins, Sami Zayn, Kevin Owens, the Young Bucks, Adam Cole, those guys were all really big on the independent scene 10, 15 years ago. And then they were able to get into one of those bigger promotions. They made it work for them. And then they've gotten to a place where they're sort of changing what mainstream major promotion wrestling looks like, just because they developed their style on the independent scene. And so they were able to
Right.
walk in with like an established character, an established fan base, and just a really high level of skill that they're able to utilize on a major network.
Yeah, and there are a few wrestlers that were at America's Most Wanted that have been popping up in Ring of Honor and or just other AEW spots, which is really fun.
Yeah, and I think that's another, for just me as a fan, I think that's one of the coolest things I like about going to independent shows is when you're at an independent show, well, number one, the focus almost exclusively of an independent show is the live show itself. Because when you go to, let's say, a WWE show, it might be a TV show. So they might be more focused on the TV aspect than the
Mm,
person sitting in the seat. Are they having a good time? When you're at an independent show, first and foremost, all the wrestlers want to make sure you're having a good time, because then you're giving the energy and it helps them perform better, right? But
yeah.
when you go to a show, you're going to see people of varying experience levels. So you might see someone who's brand new on the scene, only been wrestling for a couple of years. You might see somebody who's been doing this for 10 years and they're making a huge name for themselves and they're about to get scooped up by a major promotion. You might see somebody who was working for a major promotion and they got burnt out, or maybe they got let go or something, and they're back to make a name for themselves again on the independent scene. You might see somebody who was a wrestler in the 90s who is semi-retired and just kind of having fun. Or you might see somebody who's just a veteran who's been out on the independent scene for 20 plus years and that's all they want to do. Or, maybe they're unemployable for something bad that they did. And,
Wah, wah.
or maybe they are just kind of unemployable. Like the kind of wrestling they like to do is just wouldn't play on TV, or maybe they're just like super violent or super vulgar or super whatever.
So, Michael, you've watched professional wrestling. You now watch indie wrestling. What is your relationship with the GCW?
They first came on my radar in maybe 2018 or so. Like I moved to LA in 2016, and the independent shows I would go see all the time were Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, PWG. And I
Mm,
think as I was going there, that was like the indie to watch. It was a lot of high flying, like acrobatic style wrestling. And I thought it was really great. And just like they got super popular. And it was right around the time that AEW, All Elite Wrestling, became a company on TV. And a lot of the wrestling roster and behind the scenes people got hired by All Elite Wrestling. And so there was a little bit of a vacuum for me. And then I had a friend be like, hey man, I'm hearing about this new promotion called Game Changer Wrestling.
mm.
And apparently they do some super violent stuff. And so me as a wrestling fan, I was always a big fan of the extreme stuff, the violent stuff. So as soon as I heard that I could maybe see a death match live, I was so stoked. So I went to I believe it was November 8th, 2019. They had an event called Slime Language, and
No, gross.
I got to see my very first death match, and it was truly a life-changing experience for me. A friend of mine was there, and he took a video of me experiencing me at my very first death match. And Samee, I want to play a game with you right now.
Sure,
We're
sure,
going to
sure.
show the video,
Okay.
and I want you to guess, what is Michael reacting to? if you had to guess what was happening in the ring.
Okay.
While you're thinking, I just want to say thank you to my friend Kyle Corpening who took that video.
Bless you, Kyle. Okay. I'm guessing that it is a handsaw, much like in Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man bone saw when he did this.
Mm-hmm.
I think somebody was dropped onto a chair that was holding up the saw teeth up.
You're in the ballpark.
Okay, great.
Of what's going on. Do you want me to
Oh,
tell you what
no.
happened? Or do we want to tease it out?
Let's put a pin in this, and we'll return to this later, so the listeners
let's get into the show. Let's find
yeah.
out what GCW is all about, and sort of based on everything we learned, let's revisit at the end of the episode. And knowing everything we know about GCW, maybe you'll have a better idea. So that was 2019. We're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the event that Samee went to live. December 16th, 2022, GCW presents Amerikaz Most Wanted.
Now, that says Amerikaz with a Z if you're Googling, and it also is available on Fight TV, which is a $4.99 monthly subscription.
Which we paid, and we watched it, and I had a great time with it.
Yeah, it was really, really fun. I think that because this match was like a blueprint for me, everything while I was rewatching it, the multiple times that we rewatched this card, ? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Sick. Wrestling Academy.
Yeah, look at you. I was about to say, like, look at you learning terms, knowing stuff.
Let me throw them out in my daily life all the time. So yeah, when I was rewatching it, all of my original feelings, all of my initial feelings, like, were coming back, and oh boy, what a ride this event was. So
yeah, can you put us, like, mentally, where were you walking into this? Like, were you thinking, like, this is going to be dumb, or were you, like, cynical walking in, or were you excited?
No, I wasn't cynical while I was walking in, because he did a pretty good job of, like, preparing me. Like, obviously you've kind of shaped this philosophy of sharing wrestling where you kind of know how to say enough that it's interesting, but not too much where you're, like, spoiling it all or, like, over explaining. So I was walking in, like, pretty, as far as surface level, I was pretty, like, blank slate. Like, I didn't know what I was going into. So GCW is frequently at the Ukrainian Cultural Center when they're in Los Angeles.
Which is just like
wooden chairs. The color scheme of the Ukrainian Cultural Center is like, it's like lots of blues and golds, and yes, it is very brightly lit, which is kind of the first thing that surprised me. I was like, oh, why is it so bright? But then I realized that, like, oh, we have to see everything. So I then understood.
I do think that is also a hallmark of independent wrestling, is because
Yeah.
again, they don't have the resources to rent a stadium like
Sure.
the WWE would be able to. So they're like, we kind of need to rent where we can get space. And so a lot of them are just like, hey, we got fluorescent lights. You know, a lot of wrestling happens in like American Legion halls because they're just huge. You can fit a lot of people plus a ring, but lighting is just going to be what it is.
Right. Another thing that was shocking to me was that the ring is actually smaller than I thought it would be. Like, I thought it's like maybe a California King, slightly bigger. This is inaccurate. I don't know how to measure stuff.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty decently big.
I think I thought it was going to be like a whole bedroom size. Like, maybe my palatial apartment in New York City is the size of a ring. Actually, I'll look that up. But ring size shocked me. I thought it was going to be bigger. It was bright lights, and then I see you, and you're like, "Hey, there's like food here." I was like, and I got nachos and a Red Bull, which could have been a disaster for my stomach because I haven't had a Red Bull in a long time, and I was so like, I think I was just nervous and excited about seeing wrestling that I didn't quite eat that day. Maybe my body just knew that something was going to change.
So you were just operating off straight Red Bull.
Yeah, it was Red Bull and nachos.
Dude, hell yeah. So your body was ready to be just so amped immediately.
Well, the tickets that we had were standing room only, and I do think that if we had chairs, it may have taken me a little bit longer to get into it, but with recognizing who I am as a person and how excited I get, I don't think it would have taken that much longer, but there is a difference in experience because I went to my first AEW show recently and I got seated seats and it's a different vibe. It's a different vibe.
You're also way further away when you go to one of those big stadium shows.
Yeah, I couldn't smell anybody. It was kind of upsetting.
The reason I don't like to get seats whenever I go to a smaller independent promotion is, you can attest, people get thrown out of that damn ring all the time, and someone is just about to get rocketed into the front row. So it is like, your safety is not guaranteed if you're sitting in the front row. They might come directly at you. They might be fighting right in front of you.
Right.
And you can see it on the tape. There's a dude is trying to record something with his phone, and he gets hit in the hand with a door, and it just whacks the phone out of his hand. So you're a lot closer to the action, but the action could get you. Yeah,
the action could get you. There's definitely a splash zone in an indie
100%. So I like to do standing room because you can kind of maneuver and get around, and that just adds to the experience for me.
Yeah, and continuing on just my first impressions and the vibe, like there's a lot more diversity in the audience than I thought was going to happen. I don't really necessarily know what I was going to walk into. I was pulling maybe some experience from the 90s where there was just like kids in wrestling t-shirts doing suckets, maybe.
We all grew up. We're in our mid-30s. We still do all that shit.
Right. The wrestling t-shirt is under a nice button up. But yeah, there was a lot more diversity than I expected, and it didn't click until I was there. But wrestling is like really pretty like punk rock, and obviously indie wrestling is also punk rock. So we were behind and next to some pretty like punk rock identifying and presenting people, which I was like, oh, hell yeah, cool. My old crew.
Yeah, so I think taking it into maybe the music realm, if you've never been to an independent show, if in your life you've ever been to like a punk or a hardcore music show, very similar crowds going to both, where it's a lot of jean jackets, a lot of dyed
Studs,
hair,
yeah,
a lot of green and black hair, a lot of long, cool biker beards.
Love it. It's so fun.
And then a lot of Hawaiian shirts lately.
So the first match was a 6-way scramble, which is a 6-man free-for-all exhibition match.
Yeah, basically there are 6 competitors, and whoever gets the pin first wins the whole match.
This is scheduled for 1 fall, and then everyone screams, 1 fall! Oh, man. All right, so here are the wrestlers in the 6-way scramble match. We have Jordan Oliver and Nick Wayne, who are famously in a tag team, the East West Express.
Yeah, they were. I believe Nick Wayne has since he now works at AEW. So
he's on his last few GCW events. He reported, yeah.
So yeah, it's one of those things. Like, yeah, but they are absolutely a team.
Nick Wayne at the time was 17 years old, 18 years old, which is wild to me. Didn't think that was legal. Then we have Titus Alexander, who wrestles and looks like a televised wrestler already. Do you get that vibe too? Cool. Sick. Then we have Cole Raderick and Alec Price, who didn't do anything particularly heely during this match, but he gives me like Rasputin from Anastasia vibes. Is that?
Yeah, he definitely seems like he's a villainous character.
Yeah.
And so like, yeah, it was a lot of slithering and a lot of middle fingers, which is kind
Yeah.
of the I would say the main thing that I was noticing is a lot of these guys seemed a lot younger in their
Mm.
careers. So I think a lot of times for me, what that means, and again, I like no disrespect if these guys have been doing this for 15 years or something like that. I think I just mean that like there are people who have their presentation and their character down, and then there are
Mm-hmm.
some people who are like, how does the crowd receive me? How do I get my reactions from the crowd? And
Sure.
for I think some people when they're a little less experienced or still figuring that stuff out, they've got like the technical aspect down, and so they're learning and playing with what is their persona, what is their character. And so I
Mm.
think that was kind of what I was getting from a lot of these guys. Some of them like very fun to find characters like Jack Cartwheel.
That's who I was
Guess
saving him for last.
yeah, guess what his character is? His name is Jack Cartwheel. And then you've got some people who are like, "Oh, let me try being like a cocky bad guy. Maybe that works for me." Or
Mm.
let me just be a good guy who gives it his best. So it just sort of depends, I guess.
I was saving Jack Cartwheel for last.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Because his name is his gimmick, and well, I'll be darned if I never thought about ever seeing somebody actually weaponize a cartwheel in real life. I've seen it in fighting video games, not in real life. Do you Jack Cartwheel, Michael question mark?
Yeah, so here's what I will honestly say. Jack Cartwheel, if you're listening to this, I have taken so many friends to live wrestling shows, and people come alive when they see Jack Cartwheel do his thing. So I would say if you're trying to get somebody into wrestling, maybe start with Jack Cartwheel because people viscerally respond to him. And I think what it is, what I honestly think it is it's just so simple. You know, his name is Jack Cartwheel.
Mhm.
He does a cool cartwheel.
Mhm.
Everybody goes nuts for the cartwheel. And I think that's the thing about seeing wrestling live is you're just in this arena full of, or you're in this like room full of people, hundreds of people watching a grown man do a cartwheel. And we're all like, yes,
You're like,
he did a
"Whoa."
cartwheel. And
Yeah.
so, and I would also say like one of the, I wish I remembered this wrestler's name. One of the biggest reactions I've ever personally live witnessed is there was a luchador wrestler who was basically dressed up like a cat from
Huh.
the musical Cats, and he would just do little cat motions while he was beating his opponents. And like watching a dude hit like a flip and then lick his paw, the
Oh,
room went insane. We all went
absolutely.
crazy.
Oh my
And I
god.
think that's the point. You're like, you're there, you're experiencing it live. You're like, I cannot believe I get to see this. I get to watch this. And I think Jack Cartwheel is the perfect example of that. If you're like coming to the ring, Jack Cartwheel, and people are like, I wonder what his deal is. Then you see him do a cartwheel, and you're like, yes,
It is exactly what you think it is.
I got exactly what I wanted. And turns out I haven't seen a cartwheel in 20 years since I was a kid. And then I get
Right.
to just see this guy do a bunch of cartwheels. It's great.
Right. And he's not just like cartwheeling as transportation. He cartwheels as launching momentum to get him out of the ring and onto his opponents. And he also at one point gets Alec Price draped across his shoulders. Another wrestler comes in. He uses Alec Price as a weapon on him, and then he cartwheels and he lands on Alec Price because he's still on his shoulders and cartwheels that way. Wow.
Cartwheeling is Jack Cartwheel's ethos. So,
Ah,
so Jack,
gosh.
if you're listening, we love you.
We do.
And basically, everybody I've ever brought to a GCW show who got to see a Jack Cartwheel match is a huge Jack Cartwheel fan.
And I think he's like currently working on breaking a Guinness World Record of one-armed cartwheels. So good luck, buddy. I hope you break it.
Yeah, I hope to see you in the Guinness Book of World Records one day. So as you mentioned, Jack Cartwheel does pick up the victory in this 6-person scramble.
Yes, he picks up the 6-person scramble. Just things of note: Nick and Jordan are tag team partners, as I mentioned, but they never betrayed each other, which is really, really sweet and nice. Um, and the official wrestling stopwatch is 50 minutes and 24 seconds. And like, what a smart type of match to start a wrestling event with, and what a I'll say it a billion times as during this recording. What a lucky night that this was the one that I went to. This wrestling match started with Jack cartwheeling, and then Alec Price tries and messes up. Oh, what a loser! Um, yeah, it's just this. It just beautiful. It's just beautiful.
You walk in, you crack a Red Bull, and then you immediately see a cartwheel, and you're like, "We're
Yeah,
off to the races."
right. Which I will admit, like when I saw it, I was a little apprehensive at first. There were still some boundaries that I needed to work through, and the cartwheeling of it all helped soften the walls in order for them to break down.
I think that's what I mean when I think a lot of times when people who maybe haven't experienced wrestling, they'll come to a show, and I think you'll find that wrestlers are pretty self-aware about
Mhm.
how they're coming across to the audience. And so I think having a situation where a dude's like, I'm gonna do a cartwheel. I think for me, there is a moment where you're like, that's just really fun and silly, and clearly this guy can do really cool flips, but also is doing a cartwheel, and he's not taking himself too seriously. And I think it's a lot easier to get on board.
The match itself was very fast paced. Obviously, there was 6 people free for alling, and the momentum of picks up at the end where everybody is trying to pin everybody.
I mean, it really was a good showcase of everybody having, and that, I guess that's what I meant, where it's like, I think a lot of these guys, me personally, I've been going to GCW for a while, and I don't quite have a sense of what their characters quite are, but everything I know about these guys is every time I see them in the ring, they're really technically skilled. So you're going to see a lot of like fast paced, like well timed, technical flipping and all kinds of stuff. And it's like very fast paced and acrobatic and fun. Sometimes it's like for an opening match, like, yeah, we don't really need characters. We just need cool in ring action. Like, let's get to it.
There's one point where Titus Alexander had Jordan Oliver, and he was about to do a suplex, and I've never seen this before. Still, not just because that was my first match, but still, where Jordan messed with the momentum of Titus by just like kicking out a little bit, like just like in the air, he just like kicked out. It was really cool. Anyways, that's it.
Yeah. So from there, we move on to our next match. It's just a one-on-one singles match between Starboy Charlie and Matt Cardona.
Starboy Charlie reminds me of our friend Nikki. He comes in overalls, short overalls with no shirt. What a hunk!
Yeah, I mean, he's got a pretty nice bod, I think.
Yeah, he's got a great bod. He's got a great mop of hair, and then the crowd hears Matt Cardona come in, and ooh, the distaste of this man that we all seemingly should have is just, it's so strong and so potent. And I even took a stopwatch, official wrestling stopwatch of how long it took for the crowd to settle down with boos after Matt Cardona took the mic, and it was a whole 54 seconds of just straight up booing and hating on this guy.
Matt Cardona was a wrestler for the WWE for something like 15 years. And you can tell, like, he's got the size and his physique is as such where it's like, yeah. And I think when you see him, he has just like an ability to command the room in a way where you're like, this guy has been doing this for a very, very long time and he's very skilled. So he was working for the WWE 15 years, was let go, and has been sort of revitalizing his career on the independent scene. And so he's playing a very villainous heel and a very villainous bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
And his character is as such that he's treating the fact that he was in the WWE, that it makes him better than everybody else who are maybe trying to break into the industry. So I
Hmm.
remember you asking me, do independent promotions have storylines? And the answer is it's a little complex because the roster is so fluid. People might be working 5 different independent promotions, and all of those promotions are their own entity. So they don't really have any, you don't have the ability to build story beats. So basically, what you're seeing is people evolve their character. And that's what Matt Cardona is bringing to GCW. So it's like we're seeing a story, but the story is whatever Matt Cardona wants to do whenever he's at an independent promotion. So he's telling a story, but it's not necessarily connected to the specific show we're at. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, his character right now is he's the indie god. He came from the WWE and he's just sort of conquering all these smaller promotions that are beneath him. So when he walks into GCW, he grabs the mic and
Hmm.
immediately just starts talking about, you know, how there's no catering and how he's used to flying in first class, but now he has
Middle
to fly
seat,
in coach. Yeah,
middle
exactly. Now he
seat,
has to,
middle
and then
seat.
he's like, and I get to the venue and we're changing in an alley. This place sucks or whatever. So everybody is immediately like, "Ugh, this guy thinks he's better than us," and we start booing him or whatever. But
Yeah.
that was what I was noticing during this whole match, like his ability to just immediately, because he's walking through the crowd and people are right in his face, like flipping him off and yelling
Oh.
at him,
Oh
and
yeah.
he gets the ability to like stop and look at the person and address them. And it's like, that's just a part of the live experience. We're like, oh, that just makes it feel so real and so vibrant that they're
Right.
interacting with us, the audience.
Yeah, and he's so good. Again, my first time with a heel like this, and I really, it's just there was no way around it. I never stopped, especially during the 2 minutes that he took to get into the ring. I never stopped and been like, "Hey guys, actually, we don't know what his day was like. Maybe he just had a really bad day." It was just like,
We're
"Oh,
all fighting
I
invisible
hate this
battles.
guy." Right, right. So his vibe of being over GCW and being the god of everything carries on into his behavior in the match with Starboy. So Starboy is obviously a younger guy, and so he Matt Cardona does a lot of posturing and like, "Woof, look at this fucking like toddler that I'm wrestling, and I can't believe that they put me up against this guy."
If it makes sense, he's wrestling in a condescending way.
Yeah,
So it's like,
yeah,
I'm not gonna take Starboy seriously at all. Like,
yeah. Like to
I'm
the
gonna
point,
treat him like he's a young pup or whatever.
right? To the point where he goes on his knees in order to get like a knuckle lock
Test
thing.
of strength,
Yeah, the
sort of.
test of strength, which was just humiliating, and what a move.
And so that builds in you, the audience, like, oh, I want to. So, like, again, to answer your question, do independent promotions have storylines? This is a story. So it's taking
Hmm.
place in this one segment, right? So Matt Cardona, he walks in, he says he's better than everybody else, and you, the audience, want to see Starboy beat him. That is a story, but it's being told in the 15 minutes they're in the ring. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. It's obviously a archetypal like David and Goliath match. Matt Cardona's a huge dude. Starboy doesn't have a shirt on, but he does have overalls,
And he's
and
got heart.
he's got a lot of heart. The audience uh, was we were all behind Starboy, and it's not even just because Matt Cardona sucks. Starboy just fought with a lot of heart, and he ends up taking the W from Matt Cardona.
And again, just like Matt Cardona, the consummate professional performer, like really milks the like, I lost to
What?
this chump. Like, he's so
Right.
angry. And it's like, again, when you're live, you just get to have that feeling wash over you of being like, this guy was being unfair, and then he was beaten, and the good guy wins, and you get to have that feeling where you're just like, oh fuck yes, justice.
It was one of those matches that has like no gray area. This is just a classic story that we saw in 13 minutes and 38 seconds.
So after this match, we move on to a triple threat match between three lady wrestlers. We got Masha Slamovich, Dark Sheik, and Sawyer Wreck. So I
Yeah,
guess
baby.
so. Sammy, I guess walking into this, did you were kind of telling me you kind of had some fears and anxieties that cropped up when you saw that a women's match was about to take place. How were those fears like alleviated? Were they confirmed?
Yeah, well, the fears were that people were not going to take it seriously. Like, this was the match that people were going to go and get some more nachos, go to the bathroom. They were going to be overly sexualized in a weird way, and that all of that stuff was definitely not the case at all. I think one thing I really appreciate is that at GCW, everybody wrestles everybody, and everybody's like taken seriously, and like it's definitely not a like NBA WNBA type situation. It's just, this is fucking wrestling, and these people are putting their entire bodies into this match, and that's it. That's the beginning and end of it, and I really appreciated that a lot.
So getting into this match, we have Masha Slamovich,
Mm-hmm.
Dark Sheik, Sawyer Wreck. And I think
Mm-hmm.
the main thing to keep in mind for a triple threat match, that means whoever gets the pinfall wins. So three people are
One
fighting, but
fall.
only one person can get the pinfall. And so a lot of times what you'll see in a triple threat match is it's a game of shifting alliances, right? Where it's like two people might start off on the same team, but then it'll get down to like, well, only one of us can win, and then the alliances will shift. So that kind of is what happens at the top of the match. Sawyer Wreck and Dark Sheik are sort of like, should we team up and beat the shit out of Masha Slamovich? You can see Masha kind of putting it all together. She's like, oh no, these two are about to gang up on me. And so to seal the alliance,
Mm.
Dark Sheik and Sawyer Wreck just start making out, which
Sealed with a
again,
kiss.
like a fun, salacious thing. But then Masha Slamovich gets mad that they're teaming up, so she suplexes Sawyer Wreck, I think, and
Mm-hmm.
because Sawyer and Dark Sheik are kissing, they're attached at the lips, and Sawyer Wreck gets suplexed too. It's like, again, when you're there live, it's such a funny, goofy,
Yeah.
Looney Tunes cartoon logic that like it just tickles you to watch. Where you're like, of course, comedy logic wise, they were attached at the lips. That makes sense.
Yeah, duh. That's cartoon physics.
Yeah. So like again, the match is going on. It's really great, and I just want to shout out that I've been seeing Sawyer Wreck a lot at when I go to these GCW shows,
Bless Sawyer.
and I think what I was reading when I was doing my research on her, I think she's newer on the wrestling scene, and just what I appreciate about her is she just seems so insanely stoked to
100%.
be doing whatever. And again, she does violent deathmatch style matches and stuff like that, and so she'll just like, I've seen so many pictures of her fully covered in blood, just like smiling ear to ear, like so stoked to be doing death matches, so stoked to be in this triple threat.
Yeah, she smiles through the whole thing, getting slammed,
Getting
coming off
slammed,
the
slamming
mat,
other
she's
people.
smiling.
The other thing about Sawyer Wreck that I think is important to this match specifically is she's like 6 feet tall. She's huge.
100%. Yeah.
So she's looming over the other two competitors the entire time. So like Sawyer and Dark Sheik were kind of teamed up, but at a certain point, it's like, look, like you can just sort of visually see Sawyer Wreck is bigger than us and she's throwing us around. So then Dark Sheik and Masha Slamovich have to team up at a certain point to be like, all right, look, we gotta work together to defeat this Masha Slamovich threat. And they do, again, getting into that fun, cartoony logic. They get on each other's shoulders like two kids in a trench coat, and that allows them to be able to like cope with Masha Slamovich's size and strength.
Sawyer Rex.
In Sawyer Rex size and strength, and so they're able to hit like a choke slam. But like it's like two kids in a trench coat doing a choke slam. Incredible. Masha Slamovich, and like once they get into that, Masha Slamovich is able to like dispatch Dark Sheik, and she ends up walking away with the victory. And what's cool about Masha is she was right on her way to, I think, a couple months later when we were in New York, she challenges for the GCW title, the top title in the company. So it's like, yeah, she does this, and you can tell that like, yeah, this person's gaining a ton of popularity. She's on her way up, and she's about to like pick up this championship potentially.
Rules.
consolation prize. Sawyer Wreck and Dark Sheik were like, oh man, we lost. What are we to do? They got to make out again, I guess.
Let's kiss anyway. Oh
Yeah,
my
they
gosh,
kissed anyway.
so
They're like,
fun.
hey, just no hard feelings. Let's get back to it. And then I tried to look into it to see if they were like, are they a tag team or were they an alliance or something? I couldn't
Hmm.
find anything solid, but suffice it to say, they have some kinds of a positive feeling towards each other,
Yeah.
at least for one night.
GCW isn't afraid to buy into something that I've been championing for my entire life, which is kiss your friends.
Yeah, if you're friends with somebody, just give them a kiss.
Just give them a kiss. Why not?
Yeah, what's the big
Appreciate.
deal, dude?
And this match was a total of 8 minutes and 3 seconds, but it is a beautiful 8 minutes and 3 seconds.
Yeah.
FightTV.com.
So the next match after this is a 6-way tag team match, and it's between two sort of, would you say, like lucha-based teams? So for people who might not know, lucha libre is its own sort of style and flavor of wrestling. So you're going to see a lot more acrobatics in the ring, a lot more like flips, so much like cool, innovative, almost gymnastics at a certain point. These guys are hitting floor routines on each other.
Right. And another touch point of Lucha Libre is that it has rapid holds and submissions. So after they're flipping around in the air and then flipping around on each other, they'll like get into this really complicated, like I've never seen actual bodies tangled up until I saw this lucha match where they're tangled up, then they hold each other, then they change positions, hold each other again, and it's incredibly fast paced and wild. And I want to get into a little bit of the history of lucha libre. We'll cover it for sure in an episode down the road, but for some context, Lucha Libre started in Mexico, and lucha, as we know it, started in the early 1930s after a guy named Salvador Lutaroth Gonzalez was invited to El Paso, Texas in 1929 to watch wrestling. He loved it so much that he brought it back to Mexico and started Empresa Mexicana de Lucha Libre, which is Mexican Wrestling Enterprise. And the masks of it all. Masks are a big thing in Lucha Libre.
So if you're thinking about it's like a wrestler you might be aware of is like Rey Mysterio, how he
Yeah,
wears the
baby.
mask and stuff like that. That's Lucha Libre. So he's like lucha inspired. And I think a lot of times in wrestling, if you see somebody wearing a mask, they're probably wrestling in the Lucha Libre tradition.
Lucha Libre style, yeah. So the first wrestler to wear a mask in Mexico in ring was actually an American wrestler from Chicago. And then 2 years after that, Salvador was like, yes, please. So then all of the wrestlers doing Lucha Libre style started wearing masks. There's an incredible history, again, behind Lucha Libre. We'll get more into it later. But
We will get into it.
We will absolutely get into it. I do want to mention a style of match in Lucha Libre called luchas de apuestas, which is matches with wagers. So when things get really heated between two competitors, they'll eventually like wager their masks. So the person who loses has to be unmasked, which is incredibly humiliating, disrespectful.
It's like giving up your identity, basically.
Right, right. And so you definitely don't want to do that. But another style of luchas de apuestas is mask versus hair, in which the loser has to shave their hair after the match. And since you don't have a beard anymore, Michael, I want to do some investigative digging here. Did you wager your beard in a luchas de apuestas and you lost?
Yeah, me and Sammy were in a Lucha de Apuestas match, a mask versus beard match, and I lost.
And that's mask, M-A-S-K, not M-A-S-C, but that would also be accurate. Another interesting thing that I learned was that the heel and babyface dynamic character archetype had carried over to Lucha Libre, and they call them the Rudos versus the Técnicos, the Técnicos, which is, again, what a fun fact.
Yeah, so like in wrestling, it's good guy, bad guy. bad guy is heel, good guy is face, and so in the Lucha Libre tradition, what would be the heel? Rudo, I assume,
The heel is a Rudo, yeah.
and then the face is the
Technico.
Technico.
Do you consider yourself a Rudo or a Technico?
I've been known to get down on some Rudo tactics. I'll say that.
Fair, fair. All right. So the wrestlers in the six-way tag team match are Gringo Loco, Los Vipers, Ares, King of Strange Style, and Commander. Within the first 4 minutes, this is what we get. We get Ares doing a kip up sequence where he's kipping up in rapid succession 3 times, and Latigo's just stunned and holding his hand during all of this. He doesn't know what to do. And then Commander is the wrestler that really like went into my heart. He treats the top rope like a tightrope, and he walks around on it casually. At one point, a commentator literally goes, "Did he just squat on the top rope?" And he did. So
He did.
He really did. So he's also just super rad. He ends a sequence, a flippy sequence, with a Spider-Man pose. And then Gringo Loco comes in. He reverses a whip into the corner of a ring with 2 somersaults.
Yeah, he's sort of. It's like he's and I would say Gringo Loco. He's a little bit of a bigger guy, and so you watch this like big guy like do 2 flips, and then he lands in the corner on his feet and just goes like gets all a little gets a little vibey, gets a little swag in the corner. And again, I watching it back on the tape, I remember seeing this live and was just like, dude, yes. It just, well, like, put it in a bottle. I want to drink this feeling. It just felt so good to watch this guy. And again, I think that's what I like the most about Gringo Loco is he's just got so much
He's got
like
swagger.
pizzazz in what he's doing and so much swagger that it's like not only is he hitting these really technically impressive moves, but he's looking cool and being cool while he's doing it.
Yeah, he's incredible and definitely one of our shared favorite wrestlers. And one more sequence that happened within the first 4 minutes is after Gringo does his very, very cool swaggy move, Commander jumps off the top rope from the corner. Then he gets his legs on Gringo's shoulders and then twists him down into the mat. And again, like I've never seen people move like this before. I've never shared the experience with a group of people before. I'm sweaty thinking about it now. I'm sweaty. I was sweaty when I watched it. I was sweaty when we were watching this recently, and I just love Lucha Libre so much.
Yeah, you're gonna see anytime you get a chance to check out lucha matches, you're gonna see just such technically impressive, gravity-defying stunts. And again, the thing that I've been noticing that I notice a lot of luchadors do is the way they play with the ring ropes themselves. So a lot of times in American wrestling, it's just basically someone's going to get thrown into them and bounce off of them. But it's like I've seen luchadors walk the top rope like a tightrope. I've seen them bounce between the second and third rope several times just to show they can do it. And you're watching and you're just like, oh man, they're just like taking the canvas, which is the ring, and then just like painting a completely different, amazing style with it.
It's
and
really gorgeous.
I think just the pure athleticism is going to be another thing. If you haven't seen a ton of wrestling, that you're just like, how can you not be impressed by the amount of choreography you're seeing, the amount of like gymnastics, the amount of like sports prowess on display.
So another moment that I just really was just so excited by was Ares bounces off the ropes and then he has an opponent like on his knees and Ares goes and like quickly stomps on the back of this guy's back, and then like I think that we all were shocked. The commentators were shocked, and I think about it. I think about this movement a lot because I've seen it in video games again, but I never really thought that this was going to be something that I experienced in real life.
Up next, we have a singles bout for the GCW Extreme Championship. That's Pagano versus Joey Janela. Something interesting to note about this match is this is sort of a longer storytelling convention, I think, a little bit. So this match that we're seeing right now was technically a rematch. So GCW and another independent promotion teamed up for a cross promotion. So the name of the other promotion is called Zona 23. And from what I could tell, they were sort of a hardcore deathmatch style, extreme sort of wrestling promotion based out of Mexico. And they did a cross promotion where they did an event in Mexico. And at least in the match I saw, it took place literally in a junkyard, which added to the mystique where you're seeing all these like junky cars and like guys fighting inside of a junkyard. And it was the first bout between Pagano and Joey Janela. Pagano picks up the victory, so he's rolling into this rematch for a title, knowing that he's one victory ahead. So I bet he's feeling pretty confident. Or at least he would be until Joey Janela shows up to the ring holding a 14-foot granite Burmese python. Yeah, fact that Joey Janela is on a reality show. So I looked up what reality show Joey Janela was on, and I found it. He was on a reality show called Reptile Royalty on the Roku channel, and I watched the whole first episode. And so here's the deal. Here's the deal with Reptile Royalty. So it's like a workplace reality show, like Cake Boss or like Pawn Stars or something like that. And it's about this guy named Jay Brewer who owns a place called the Reptile Zoo in Southern California. And basically, I couldn't tell if it was a pet store or if it's like a sanctuary for just like lizards and stuff. And so basically the setup of the show is it's just about the hectic day-to-day lives of what it takes to run the reptile zoo. And in the very first episode, who should walk in the doors but Joey Janela? And he's like, look, guys, I've got a big match coming up and I'm looking to impress. I want to do something that will shock and excite the fans. And so Jay Brewer is more than happy to hook him up with a lizard-based solution to this problem.
Oh, yeah, you have to get the right snake, of course.
Oh, yeah, he's got to do the right snake. He almost didn't do a snake. So the first one he gets is like a snake that has like a fear reaction and like musks on him.
Oh.
And so you can see on Joey's face where he's like, what is going on here? What is this? And they're like, all right. So then they're like, well, let's try this other lizard called a water monitor, which I had never heard. It kind of looks like a Komodo dragon, just sort of a big lizard with claws. And they hand it to Joey, and it just immediately starts like climbing and crawling all over him. And you can see look, Joey's a consummate professional. Mm-hmm. He's done a lot of hardcore wrestling. He's done a lot of wild stuff. But you can see him being like, is this lizard about to like scratch and bite me? Like, oh my God. They're like, okay, well, this is a little feisty. And they're like, maybe we have one other snake we can use. And they bring in this 14-foot Burmese python. And they're like, so the cool thing about these is they don't have ears. So if we bring the snake into a room full of cheering fans, it won't pick up. It'll just sense vibrations. So
wow.
Like it's kind of ideal to have a snake. And Joey's like, hey man, that'll be perfect. And so they load. God. So they load the snake into a crate and they bring it to the Ukrainian Cultural Center. If you pause the video at the 21-minute and 33-second mark of the episode, you will see me and Sammy in the crowd reacting to the snake.
How'd we look?
I thought we looked good. I would say interesting in regards to wrestling is they show the backstage of the Ukrainian Cultural Center. And I was blown away. When Matt Cardona says they were changing in an alley, he's not lying. What they do is they tarp off an alleyway, and like all the wrestlers is just in that back alley, and that's where they're getting changed and getting ready for the match. And you can literally see 5 feet over a wall, there's a chain link fence, and then it's just a parking garage.
Yeah, so we park.
Yeah, so someone who parking can just like look over this wall and just see all the wrestlers hanging out and getting ready. It was like totally wild. So
that's crazy.
When we talk about the levels of independent wrestling. It's like these performers are out here. You know, the match we were just talking about, these luchadors, it's like they put their bodies on the line and now they're like going and hanging out in this back alley. So it's like you gotta pay respect the amount of sacrifice they're putting in to make this show like look good for the fans.
Right.
At the end of the episode, like Joey Janela is like, yeah, man, that was like a wild and crazy. That's like, honestly, maybe one of the top craziest things I've ever done in wrestling. And what's funny about that statement is truly 3 months ago, Joey Janela set his own foot on fire and like kicked a guy. So it's like, I don't know, man. I think that's way crazier than bringing a snake to the ring.
Joey, you're such a bad boy, dog.
He's a bad boy. Look, I love Joey Janela. He's awesome, and we'll always do like fun, wild stuff. But in terms of this match, right? So like all of that is swirling around, and it's like what we watch. The fans of the audience, the fans in the audience have no context about reptile royalty. We see just like a really fun, hardcore match between Joey Janela and Pagano, and these guys are like going all through the area, and they're like drinking people's beers. Since it's taking place in December, there's a dude in the audience just dressed up like Santa Claus. So at
multiple Santa Clauses.
Joey just like grabs a Santa Claus hat and a Santa Claus beard, and then just starts whipping Pagano with a Santa Claus belt, and it's just totally wild. It's one of those things. Like Pagano may have had the first victory, but when the title's on the line, Joey Janela steps up, gets the 1, 2, 3. And again, since they're both like pretty good guys, they end up sharing a White Claw at the end of the match, and it's great. What was the official wrestling stopwatch on this match, Sammy?
The official wrestling stopwatch was 18 minutes and 9 seconds.
I think the question I had for you, Sammy, is if you were going to be in a fight with somebody and they showed up to the fight holding a snake, would you freak out? I would quit. If I was like going to get in a fist fight with someone and they're like, all right, I'll be there, and they show up with a fucking python, I would quit. I would leave the fight.
I don't think there's. I think that is a very cool move, but I don't think I would be as rattled as much as you would. I think there are a lot of questions that pop up, like, am I going to be wrestling a snake too? Are you going to use it as a weapon? Like, is it illegal to punch a fucking snake? Like, all of this stuff, all of these questions pop up way before me thinking that I am scared and need to quit the fight.
Look, as soon as the snake shows up in the ring, I'm grabbing a microphone. I'm like, I quit. You win. I don't want to do this. I don't want to fight at all. No way. This guy brought a snake. He's insane. No way. I quit. You win, dude. If you want to win so bad you brought a snake, you win.
I've gone to the Santa Monica Pier. People wear a python all the time, and it's not a threat to me, I think.
That's the reason I don't go to the Santa Monica Pier, dude.
Do you have a fear of snakes?
With pythons, yeah, for sure.
Okay, fair enough. Now we know.
Yeah, so after that was like just a real fun, real short singles match between Willie Mack and Jimmy Lloyd, and again, it was super fun. Like these were like two kind of bigger guys, and they were moving around in a real fun, agile way. And it was like, what was the official wrestling stopwatch on that? Like, it was like 5 minutes. So
yeah, it was just a little over 5 minutes.
Fun, little over 5 minutes. Like, again, I think it was just like a great pace, like just a refresher pace. It's like we just saw like a 20-minute hardcore match. It's like these guys just kind of breezed in, did a lot of fun shit, and we were out.
I did some research. Willie Mack used to be in the WWE. And one of the headlines that I got after searching Jimmy Lloyd is, and I want to get this headline right. It said, Jimmy Lloyd gets scissors stuck in chest in his classic death match with Masashi Takeda. That's what I got. Those were the two dudes that were fighting, and it was a beautiful match. They're moving around the ring, very agile.
So moving on from there, we go to a singles match between Effie and Charles Mason. So this one, from what I could tell, had a bit of a longer storyline to it. To give you some context on what was going on here, Effie is in a tag team with a wrestler. Her name is Alley Catch. Their tag team is called Bussy. And so a few months ago, Effie's tag team partner, Alley Catch, she was wrestling in a singles match, and a creepy dude showed up to the ring with a box, and he handed it to her. She looked inside the box, and she got so freaked out, much like me if I saw a python. She's just like, no, I quit. I'm done with this match. She leaves the ring. Turns out that package was from Charles Mason, and he's kind of been creepily stalking her ever since. They have like a video package where he's out on the street, sort of following her around. He's in her apartment. He's like, it's like super freaking her out. And so this all culminates in a few weeks ago. They were running an event in Indiana, and Charles Mason, who was not scheduled to appear, showed up and started beating up Alley Catch, handcuffs her to the ring ropes, and is about to enact some serious violence on her. Effie, her tag team partner, runs in to make the save, and turns out that this was all a trap by Charles Mason, who actually has been having an issue with Effie, and he did all this just to get under Effie's skin. So this match is personal. So the two competitors are Charles Mason and Effie. And so one of the things I really like about GCW is I think there's a lot more, it's a lot more inclusive than maybe other spaces. So there are like, there's like a lot of diversity just like of the roster of like people who are there. There's like a lot of like women's wrestler, intergender wrestling, wrestlers of different like gender identities and different sexualities. So Effie is a gay wrestler. That's like a large portion of like what he champions and what he advocates. One of my favorite events that he runs that I finally got to see was Effie's Big Gay Brunch. And so he put on like it's like just a huge event for just like LGBTQIA plus specific wrestlers on the card. And so it's like just a really cool queer wrestling event. So he's doing that. And then Charles Mason, from what I can tell, is a real psycho, just a real sick buck. Just
disgusting. Just a bad boy in an express suit.
Yeah, he comes to the ring in a red tuxedo with tuxedo jacket, which I thought, I was like, hey, it's hot as hell in this arena. We're all sweating. He's probably going to just like pop that off almost immediately. No, dude, Charles Mason wrestles most of the match in a red tuxedo jacket.
That's how bad he is.
I would say this match is all about mind games, where it's Effie and Charles Mason trying to get under each other's skin to a certain extent. So it's like, you know, like Effie, he's a very sexuality forward wrestler. And so sometimes loves to kiss, loves to grind, loves to hump people's faces pretty much. Like,
the Bronco Buster.
So normally he's doing all those kinds of things. And like a lot of times the opponents will play up the discomfort. But in this instance, you can tell that like Charles Mason is absorbing it, but in a creepy way. It felt very control based to me, where he's like, I'm allowing this to happen, but it like leads to me having more control over you. And so it's like, I think it's sort of Effie trying to like get some kind of normal human reaction out of Charles Mason, who's just so sick and evil that he can't be reached. He can't be rattled. He's very devout in whatever his issue is, which does not get resolved in this GCW event. And it honestly culminates in Charles Mason getting the upper hand so much he has a henchman bring out a box, and he pulls out a legit piano wire. And we had the context of hardcore wrestling, extreme wrestling, deathmatch wrestling. And in my mind, I'm doing the math where I'm like, that's real wire. I cannot see a safe way that they could do this at all. Like, are we really truly about to watch Charles Mason choke Effie with real piano wire?
Yeah. I remember welling up with tears, trying to go through all of the possibilities of like how like Effie could keep it kind of safe. But I'm like, no, if you put your fingers in there, then your fingers are gonna get wired and chopped off. I was very, very concerned.
And again, I think it's like, if you were watching this sequence play out on WWE TV, for example, like my brain is immediately like, oh, somebody's going to come out and do this. But I think because GCW has the reputation that it does kind of create some fun uncertainty for the audience of being like, are they really about to do this for real? Or are they going to have what ends up happening, where it's like, so right when you think this is going to happen, Effie's tag team partner, Alley Catch, comes running out makes the save, and you're like, okay, I think we're not even messing with the wire at this point. So it turns into like this big alley catch. Effie Bussy are fighting the like henchmen, and it's like all the odds seem even, and then all of a sudden like an even bigger henchman comes out,
Gasp.
and he starts like cleaning house, and he pulls off his mask. And I remember at the time I didn't know who this wrestler was. So in breaking this all down, I did some research. I believe the guy's name is Paro, I think. And
Para?
Paro.
Yeah.
And what I found out in doing my research is like Effie and Paro are both queer wrestlers, and so they have a feud with each other dating all the way back to they were in a wrestling match called Last Daddy Standing. And basically what that means is you beat your opponent down so definitively that they cannot get up for a 10 count. So they had that match, and they've been in sort of a rivalry ever since. So what you're seeing is Paro has aligned himself with this malignant force that is Charles Mason, and everyone's sort of like, Paro, why? Like, I know you hate Effie, but hate him this much to team up with this guy who's super bad? Then Dark Sheik comes out with a bat, and she's able to sort of fend off the attack that's going to happen to Bussy. So I think around that time, I was seeing Effie, Alley Catch, and Dark Sheik kind of loosely teaming up. So we were seeing the beginning of like kind of a new alliance group, because by the time I went to Effie's Big Gay Brunch in April, so a few months later, I was seeing full on that team of people versus Charles Mason and his team of people.
Yeah, and they graduated from Bussy to Thrussy.
Yes. So
and in watching this replay, I thought it was really cute that one of the announcers kept on calling Effie Daddy. Like they were very bought into Effie and his character, and yeah, it was really real cute.
This is so funny to me. This is some real like insider nerdy wrestling stuff, but Effie's finishing move. So a lot of times wrestlers will like borrow and recycle other older finishers and repurpose them. So there was the wrestler who was on this event when he was in the WWE, Matt Cardona. When he was in the WWE, his name was Zack Ryder, and he would hit his finisher, and it was called the Rough Rider. That was his finisher. So Effie uses that same finisher on the indies, and he calls it, instead of the Rough Rider or the Zack Ryder, he calls it the Sack Rider. And that just makes me laugh so hard. Every time they're like, he hit it with the Sack Rider. And I was like, that's hilarious. That's so funny. That's incredible. Effie's
and
a
he
genius.
does hit it.
Yeah, he hits it. It looks great. And it was like, but as soon as they were like, hit him, Sack Rider. And I was like, Effie's a genius, dude. That's so funny. That's so good.
Very witty. Good job, Effie. What a prize. So the next matchup is the GCW Tag Team Championship between Los Macizos, which is made up of Ciclope and Miedo Extremo, and the Rock Nest Monsters, who is made up of BHK and Yuma. And that match was actually the Rock Nest Monsters' debut at GCW, which everybody was really excited about. What I really appreciated is that MLJ, who was announcing some of the matches, he introduced the Los Macizos in Spanish, which was a nice touch. Both of these teams have been tag teams for 10 plus years, and the official stopwatch for this match was 12 minutes and 10 seconds, and Los Macizos retained their title.
When I was watching it back, I was really blown away by, like, you can really tell that these guys are professionals. Like, they just have such a handle on what they do as teams and how to present that to the live crowd. And I just remember being like, man, these guys are such pros.
So I will say, though, that Yuma, who is on Rock Nest Monsters, he wrestles in a space suit, and it's mostly silver with blue accents. And I was realizing that I was so taken aback by it, and I felt that I was maybe offended.
The spacesuit rattled you.
I wanted it. I wanted that spacesuit.
You were jealous of the spacesuit.
I was jealous of the spacesuit. I'm jealous of Yuma, and I'm now able to admit it.
Yeah, honestly, Samee, it was really good to hear you say that.
Thank you.
That's
Thank
growth,
you.
and that's what. Hey, look, judgment free. That's what Wrestling Academy is all about. Samee wants a spacesuit.
I do.
I want to never see a python. And that's just us.
Never a python in a fight, or like forever.
Forever. Like honestly, if it was like a genie granted me 3 wishes, one of them might be like, "Hey, can I never see a snake?" I just want to guarantee as long as I'm alive, it's never gonna happen. Like I don't want all the snakes to go away or anything like that. I just want to be like, "Genie, can you grant me the ability to never encounter a snake, literally ever?"
I hope that the rest of your life is snake free.
I hope so too.
I will also admit that Cyclope, not in this match, but in other matches that I've seen him in, wrestles with headphones on and they somehow don't fall off. And I think about that at least once a day.
So this gets us to the main event for the evening. And so Samee, let's check in with you. How were you feeling at this point? Were you like fully bought in? You're like, hell yeah, whatever's coming up, like that's good.
I was ready. There's no doubt in my mind that I was a fan of wrestling by this point in time.
Here's the reason why I ask, because the main event for the evening was for the top title in GCW, the GCW Championship. It was Tony Deppen versus Nick Gage, and I feel like Nick Gage is an experience for people who are really uninitiated. So for people who don't know, Nick Gage is like he's like a founding member, like one of the earliest members of like a wrestling promotion called Combat Zone Wrestling, CZW, which as far as I'm aware is like really, really known for like hardcore, hyper violent deathmatch wrestling.
Yes.
So this dude, since like the early 2000s, has been doing hardcore deathmatch wrestling, hyper violent stuff.
Yeah.
And so it is an experience where it's like when he comes to the ring, it was crazy, and I feel like they were in and amongst the crowd, but as soon as his music hits, which is For Whom the Bell Tolls, which I think is awesome. So it's like you hear the bell chime, and it's like the guitar riff, and then this like mean looking like bald dude in like a headband and like camo pants like comes marching out, and he's like missing teeth, and he's just like looks so ready to fight. And then like 2/3 of the crowd come rushing around, and he's just got this whole gang of people who just feel like devotees to him. They're like part of the group. They totally are bought in on Nick Gage. They love Nick Gage. And I think for those uninitiated, it's like, who the hell is this guy? Like, what is going on here? And it's like the only way I can explain it. And I think what wins you over when you watch him, you're like, this dude is just so legit. Like what he's going to do, he's not going to flip around like luchadors. He's not going to do any of this stuff. This guy is about inflicting violence on people and receiving violence from people. Right. And he's just like, he's gonna hurt you. And I do think there's an authenticity to that really wins you over when you're in the ring. It might not be everybody's cup of tea, but it's like, I think it's hard to not be won over when you're watching it happen and you experience it. And then like, again, because I find myself being like, yeah, I like Nick Gage enough. But when he's in the ring and he's like, where's my fucking gang at? It really does something to me to where I'm like, I am in it. I'm the gang.
I'm a gang member.
I mean? I'm part of this. I love this.
Yeah. Well, much like Mick Foley, and actually Nick Gage has been on record saying that Cactus Jack and Terry Funk matches in Japan were part of Nick's inspiration when he was a kid, alongside his brother, just wrestling and seeing that ultra violence. That's what inspired him to start wrestling. And you mentioned CZW and the tournament of, or CZW puts on a tournament of death, and there's video footage of one tournament of death that Nick Gage was at, where he is put through just basically a wall of light tubes, and he lands on them wrong. He gets cut like kind of right here, and he has to walk off because blood is just pouring out of him. And he is aware that cameras are following him, and we see him like being kind of held down by the medic because they're like, dude, you cannot go back out there. And he's like, I would love to go back out there. I need to go back out there. And they're like, you cannot go out there. And eventually he was like, okay, well, you have it on video that I want to go back out there, okay? And They're like, okay, that's fine. He ends up having to get airlifted to a hospital because these tournaments of death are held in like farmland or something because they don't want cops to show up.
And like no real ring. It's just like
No,
truly out in the middle. It's like an experience to go to those
right, should
kinds
we
of.
go? But in this experience, he was legally dead for 7 minutes, which is just wild.
This is not like storyline stuff. This
No, this is
really
real
like
life.
really cut, really bleeding. And again, I think that speaks to like why people have such a connection to Nick Gage is because
Hmm.
he's just like he's authentically himself. And you may disagree with the kind of wrestling he does, but I think it's like you can see the passion, you can see the intensity when he comes to the ring.
Right. Yeah, he's just wild, and there he did get a little bit of heat with a Hollywood actor. Michael, would you like me to get into this?
So the actor David Arquette was like huge wrestling fan. He was a part of this movie called Ready to Rumble, and as part of that, they featured WCW World Championship Wrestling. They featured wrestlers from that promotion in the movie. So as sort of a tie-in, they had David Arquette back in the early 2000s promote this movie by going on WCW, and he wins the top championship for GCW. And this is like a very divisive thing that happened with wrestling fans. I remember a lot of like diehard wrestling fans really lost a lot of respect for WCW around that time. They lost like a lot of fans being like, okay, well, they don't respect the wrestlers enough. They put it on this like Hollywood guy who very clearly doesn't have the same like strength, experience, whatever of like wrestlers who've been doing this their entire lives. So that happened. There's like this huge controversy. David Arquette stepped away from wrestling, and I think he really genuinely felt bad about it for a really long time.
Hmm.
So in 2020, like 2019, 2018, he decides, he's like, you know what? I want to like get my respect. I want to earn my respect in wrestling and show that like I want to do this the right way. I want to show people that I actually was a wrestling fan. I really wanted to do this. So he actually started like a little bit of a wrestling career again, where he would wrestle on the independent scene. So he would really go to these like smaller venues and he would wrestle for real, and he would do it. They made a documentary about it. And just so happens that one of the matches he was in was against Nick Gage.
Yeah, they were actually making it a point that David would fight Nick Gage. And David really wanted to be taken seriously, as you said. And so he was like, okay, yeah, let's meet up. Let's hash this out with Nick and let's do it. So they meet up, and David Arquette was like, don't cut me, okay?
He's like, I'm an actor. I'm
Right.
fine with the violence. I'm an actor. Please don't cut my face.
Yeah, just don't do that. And Nick Gage, our sweet hardcore wrestler, was like, sure, no problem. So the wrestling match is going on, and in the ring, wrestlers are communicating with each other, like, okay, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that. Obviously, they hash it out a little bit before. Um,
And even in that, there's a little bit of hierarchy there, where it's like
right.
if you're deferring to the person who has more experience more often than not.
Right. So David Arquette starts going off book a little bit, and so that that angers sweet Nikki Gage. So he starts getting more and more violent, and he gives David Arquette color, which David Arquette is cut in some way. I think with
So to give someone color means to make them bleed.
right. Sorry, Wrestling Academy. So he's bleeding already, and then light tubes start popping out, and Nick Gage smashes David across the neck, and David is freaked out a little bit, and he turns his head, and he gets cut for real, like real on a part of his neck where blood starts gushing. Now, all of this is covered in a mini doc available on Amazon Prime. Dark Side of the Ring, Nick Gage, and Nick says that he saw the cut and it was gushing but not squirting. So he wasn't worried about it. So they continue wrestling. The second that the match is over, David Arquette just bolts and they have never spoken again.
He almost for real died. He almost like bled out because it
Yeah.
was a severe neck injury with light tubes or
Right.
whatever. And I think it's like Nick Gage comes across as pretty remorseless in the documentary of being
Mhm.
like, look, I'm a professional. And if he had just listened, it was like, it was a miscommunication. And I think basically David Arquette is like, honestly, pretty chill about the whole situation. He's like, look, I don't think we were on the same page communication wise.
Yeah.
I think had I known like what I was in for, I would have had some harder boundaries here. And then I think Nick is basically of the opinion that like, look, I know what I'm doing, and if he had let me do what I'm good at, I would have done it safely.
Right.
And because the fear was there, the trust wasn't there, the communication wasn't there, it led to like a big mistake that like really could have gone south, and like thankfully it didn't.
And that's not what Nick went to jail for.
Yeah, that is not what he went to jail for. He went to jail for something else for like 10 years. Went to jail for robbery for 10 years.
He got out after nearly 5 years, then he went back. So yes, he was jailed for nearly 10 years total.
I, a very complicated guy. If you want more info, we got ours from Dark Side of the Ring, so we would recommend you check it out. So all that context, like that is the guy who walks in this GCW championship match. And so again, I just know for for people who are uninitiated, it is an experience for people.
He's
And
an
so I was just
experience.
curious. Yeah, did you buy it immediately? Were you skeptical at first? Like how did it feel for you?
He's he's a scary guy. He's
Yeah.
scary, and you can feel it. But I think watching everybody kind of rally around him, because he talks a lot about how he does it for the fans, and you can tell. And seeing people rally around him, I was eased a little bit. But yeah, he's a fucking scary dude. He almost
Really
killed David
scary. Yeah,
Arquette.
I mean, again, he's like intimidating, and he just has that aura of authenticity about him, and
Yeah,
I do think that adds to his mystique when you're watching him.
yeah.
So he's the champion. He's walking into this. His opponent is a guy by the name of Tony Deppen, who, man. So okay, how do I put this? So Tony Deppen is like a dastardly bad guy, a heel, right?
Hmm.
And he is so good at what he does that it legitimately pushes my buttons in a legitimate and real way. So me, Mike, I think Tony Deppen is awesome. I think he's so good at what he does. But when he is working, he is 100% has like the key to the inside of my brain and is pushing my specific buttons in a way that drives me literally crazy. And so I'm constantly having a battle with myself every time I see Tony Deppen perform, because it's like I appreciate the work so much. He's so good at this. And also he's getting a true visceral reaction out of me. So in that sense, he's incredible. Like he's really bringing it out of me. And this is just me. This is my personal philosophy. I think if you like wrestling and you want to pay respect to wrestling as a fan, the number one thing you can do is play along, right? Like if
Mm.
you get what's going on, like Matt Cardona comes out, he's a bad guy, and I think if you want to be respectful and you want to be a good fan, you boo him. That's what you're supposed to do. It's like
Yeah.
somebody is doing a good job, you cheer them, or they're in an underdog spot, you cheer them. It's like you as the fan, that's your end of the bargain. And so the more you can not cross your arms and the more you can be engaged, be present, and like give the wrestlers what they're looking for, I think that's respect to me. That's how I pay it.
Mm.
So for me, the way I pay respect to Tony Deppen, who I think is very good, is like I hate this motherfucker, dude. Like I truly like he pisses me off so much, but he is so good. Like if you watch his in-ring work, he's incredible. You watch his character work, he's incredible. Like the
Right.
faces he makes are amazing. And
Oh,
the
very good.
specific ways he's a bad guy push my buttons so much that like I know how I truly feel, and he still gets this reaction out of me. Like within 4 seconds of his intro, he comes out and like flips off a fan, and I muttered out loud to myself in an empty apartment, like, what a prick. And I was like, oh my, he got me within 4 seconds. That's how good this guy is at being a bad guy.
He's got one of those faces where you're like, I do want to punch you in the face.
Yeah, and it's like his character has like a chip on his shoulder specifically during this time period where he's like, I've been around for so long, and Nick Gage was in rehab. He was in jail. Like, I was putting in the work. I should be the champion. And it just has this real like me energy. Like, it's not fair. And you're like, hey man, Nick Gage is cool. You're a loser. So we hope you lose. And so it's like, that's the energy. That's the dynamic walking into this match. And so it's like, again, I think Tony Deppen is very good, but he brings it out of me in a way that it's like, you got to pay respect and that he's good, but at the same time, he's good at pissing me off. So
like, yeah, up until yesterday, I really truly thought that you had a deep hatred for this man. I was convinced.
Tony, if you're listening, in my heart of hearts, I respect the work, and you're so good that like truly one of my best friends thought for about a year and a half that I despise you. That's how effective you are at this.
I literally felt sheepish, like telling you that I like Tony a little bit because I was like, I don't know, should I say
I know
it?
you really. I remember we saw GCW in New York, and you texted me really sheepishly like, "Hey, I saw Tony Deppen at the bodega after the show," and again, what I would do in my everyday life is just be like, oh, that's awesome. Like, it's cool. Tony Deppen's awesome. But like, because I want to pay so much respect to Tony Deppen and the work that he does, I was just like, kill that motherfucker. Like, get him. It's like, but that's not how I feel. Yeah, I know. It's like, that's not how I actually feel. But it's like, I do think to be respectful, to be like, I respect this guy's work so much. I'm gonna live the I hate this guy. I don't. I think he's great.
Beautiful. Okay, so we have the People's Champ, Nick Gage, versus Tony Deppen, the worst person in the world, according to Michael Klasek. And Nick Gage and allegedly, Tony Deppen have been at GCW since the beginning. And because Nick is so beloved, he actually has a special intro from MLJ. And
the ring commentator guy.
Ring commentator guy. And I do believe that me and Michael can perform this for you.
Yeah, again, I feel like this all adds to the mystique, right? So it's like the For Whom the Bell Tolls plays, you see this like mean mugging Nick Gage walk out of the curtains, like half of the arena has become the murder, death, kill gang, and they're like swarming him, they're giving him love. He like struts to the ring, and then the ring announcer hits his intro, and his intro is just like, at this point, you're like, who is this guy? What is he going to do? So it's like the announcer gets on the mic and he says this.
Fighting out of National Park, New Jersey, with an official weight of 215 pounds, representing that murder, death, kill gang worldwide, representing for all his boys locked in that fucking cell, Eastern Bloc, representing for the motherfucking hate club. Rest in peace,
Big Nate Hatred, and rest in peace his brother, Justice Payne.
And you know what it is.
It's that MDK.
All fucking day.
The man. The king. The fucking god of this shit.
And your GCW world champion, Nick fucking
Gage. And everybody goes insane.
But not that long, because Tony the Snake Deppen comes in very quickly with his first move right after the speech. Couldn't handle it. So there's a lot of things that I've noticed during these matches, and I'm trying to like kind of make sense of things. And one of the things that I have noticed is that the wrestlers that have a heel persona kind of wrestle dirty, where they're putting pressure on people with like their elbows, or like when in Matt Cardona and Starboy was holding his neck throughout after a big move, and then Matt Cardona continued to just like aim at Starboy's neck. And so Tony Deppen in this match with Nick Gage, they well, I guess they're both pretty brutal, so it's hard to see the heel moves. But Tony does snot rocket at Nick Gage, which is disgusting, unsanitary,
disrespectful,
and so disrespectful. But it is also following Nick biting his nose, so I'm not 100% sure where that falls.
I know it does sort of feel like the vibe is sort of like, well, Tony's being disrespectful and Nick Gage is just being Nick Gage, baby. So here's something actually interesting. That what you're picking up on, what you're referring to, is this is called in-ring wrestling psychology. So it's the dynamics of what's going on inside the ring to elicit the reaction from the audience. So things that you're picking up on are 100% true. So like traditionally, this is like very basic wrestling psychology 101. So if I butchered, please, nobody get mad at me. But basically what's happening is you have your baby face, you have your heel, right? So the baby face is the person you want to get cheers. The heel is the person you want to get boos. So what the heel will do is cheat, do the dirty, underhanded thing, cut corners, things that make you, as the audience, get upset with them.
Mm-hmm.
And then that gives the baby face something to react against, where it's like, this person's fighting dishonorably, this person's fighting honorably, I will cheer for them. The other thing that the heel can do is slow down the pace of the match. So a lot of times the babyface is the underdog. So what the villain will do is slow the pace down and will kill the momentum of the good guy. So that way, when it's happening, you're like, the good guy, he's about to get his main big move, and then the villain like slows it down. He starts choking him, and you as the audience, it's being the cool move you want to see is being withheld from you. So you feel more, you want it more. So that way, when it happens, you're excited. So something that Tony Deppen is doing in this match, for example, is we know that Nick Gage is a hardcore wrestler. So Tony Deppen takes every moment to set up a really cool, really satisfying hardcore spot. So you're like, we've got a chair wedged into the ring ropes. And you're like, what we know as wrestling fans is he's going to take Nick Gage and he's going to slam his head into that chair.
Oh.
And as a wrestling fan, I'm going to be so excited to see it. But what Tony Deppen does is at the last possible moment, he denies you that hardcore moment. And so you as the audience, you're like, I wanted to see that. And now I don't get it. And it makes you want something bad to happen to Tony. And then 2, it like slows that momentum down. So that way, when Nick Gage comes in, he can pick the momentum back up and you're going to be excited to see it. Again, very basic wrestling psychology 101. Hopefully, does that make sense? Did I do a good job with that?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I didn't really recognize the slowing of the pace, but now that you said that, going back to Starboy and Matt Cardona, Matt was just doing so much posturing that it took forever for anything to happen. Wow. Mind blown. Wrestling Academy, thank you.
Going back to that Matt Cardona match, it's like, so you have that expectation that they're going to fight. And what is the first thing Matt Cardona does? He rolls out of the ring and delays the start of the match. So you, as the audience, you're like, all right, these guys are going to, the guy left, like fight. What are you doing? You know what I mean? It like makes you mad. And that's the point. And so it's really cool. So anyway, back to this title match. Nick Gage has a really specific signature move. And the signature move is he pulls out an actual pizza cutter and just goes nuts on his opponent's forehead. And I want to know, like you, Samee, when you were in the ring or in the arena, like watching it, like, yeah. But it's like, how did you feel when you first saw this pizza cutter thing? Were you like, how did that feel watching it happen live?
I was so scared that we were gonna see Tony Deppen get fucking scalped in the ring. Just after the brutality of the Pagano and Joey Janela match, I was like, fuck, what the fuck is gonna happen with this pizza cutter?
And also just kind of knowing like what you know about Nick Gage, you're like, this dude is like capable of anything. Right. And that's what I like about GCW is like, it's in the heightened what's real, what's fake pro wrestling part of it. So it's like they're
Yeah.
doing a lot of things more safely than not, but then also they're doing a lot of things that are just like reckless and dangerous. So there, it does create that unease in you, the fan, where you're like, I don't know what I'm about to see, and that's part of
Hmm.
the ride for you, the fans, or for us, the fans.
Yeah.
It's just like, yeah, I don't know what they're truly capable of.
After I knew that we weren't going to see somebody get scalped, watching somebody pizza cut somebody's forehead isn't actually as brutal as you think it's going to look like. Even though, yeah, it is actually cutting their head. But pizza cutters, I mean, they're not like scalpel medical gradely sharp, but they're sharp enough that like when you go across maybe twice, you're open. And so yeah, it wasn't that brutal, but it was still brutal. You know what I mean?
I do. I think it was like in your mind you were expecting something like
Like
totally
zigzag,
disgusting at the
right?
and you were just like, oh, this is just like reasonably violent.
Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't I'm not gonna have nightmares about it. But
Yeah,
I
for sure.
what I do think is really sweet is that after Nick Gage was pizza cutting fucking Tony Deppen, he stopped to tie his shoe.
Yeah, that was something I noticed too. So like a thing Nick Gage will do is it's like again, just classic working a room 101, right? Where it's like there are four corners of the ring and he'll kind of do a thing of like which side of the ring cheers the loudest and whoever gets the loudest cheer, he'll go over and he'll pizza cut Tony Deppen over there. So he's like working the crowd. He's like, oh, should I pizza cut him here? Me watching it on Fight TV, it really did elevate it to the point of this guy is methodically beating my ass and he stopped to tie his shoe. Like that psychologically would do something to me to be like, this guy's hurting me and he thinks so little of me. He had time to be like, oh, fuck, my shoe's untied.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Instead
I
of,
don't want to trip.
if you want to murder me, think about me. Don't think about other stuff.
Don't worry about your safety too. What the hell? I want to pose this question to you, Michael.
Yeah.
If you were to bring a kitchen appliance in the ring as a weapon, what would you bring?
I'm glad you asked. I was thinking a lot about
Thank you.
this. I think for me, what I would do is the first thing that came to my mind is I would want a chef's hat and a whisk. And so that way I could like do this and then on commentary they could be like, what is he cooking up? What is he doing? And so I'd be like, yeah, do you want me to cook up a little violence
Whatever
on
it
this
is,
guy?
we're gonna be sick when he comes out.
Yeah, it's gonna be bad. It'd be like an but I think realistically if I were really in a hardcore fight, probably like a rolling pin. Because
Mm.
it's just a solid old block of wood, you know, and you're just hitting people with it. What about you? What kind of utensil would you bring?
You know, I think that I would bring a blender in only in the because it has to be plugged in. It has to be plugged in and I feel like building up the anticipation of like, oh fuck, can Sammy get a get a get a get an extension cord somewhere? Can Sammy get somebody's hand in the blender because you can't put a boot in. So it's got to be a hand. And I feel like the anticipation of getting that blender move perfectly done would be incredible. Also, you could just take the bottom off and blend blade someone. So the brutality is endless with that blender.
Speaking of brutality, this match was brutal.
Yes.
Like Nick Gage takes some violent enacts some violence on Tony Deppen. Tony Deppen, I think to his credit, fights really well and is just sort of weathering the storm. But at the end of the day, Nick Gage this time was like on an unstoppable championship run. So it's like he's given it his best shot, but he cannot compete with Nick Gage. Nick Gage ends up picking up the victory, wins the match, and that was GCW America's Most Wanted. Samee,
Thank goodness for this match. Thank goodness for GCW, and thank goodness for you, Michael. I really this. I mean, not to get too, I don't know, emotional. We were just screaming a minute ago, but like this really changed my life, and I have a deep appreciation uh for you, and I don't know. Thanks, man.
yeah, hey, You're welcome. Did you have any thoughts about the event in general, like getting the chance to like rewatch it and check back in with it? Did new things pop up for you this time?
I think like I just have an appreciation of like the actual athleticism that we're these professionals have. I mean, you miss things obviously when you're live, but to be able to watch the replay and see like just how much hang time Nick Wayne gets on a moonsault, or just rewatching the Lucha Libre match, and just I I don't really have the words to explain like just how beautiful wrestling is as an art form. Like these people are putting their bodies on the line, committing to a character that may get just booed for 5 minutes straight.
And in like hardcore matches, getting for real hurt, for
Yeah,
our
getting pizza
entertainment.
cut. Yeah, for our entertainment, and we don't know how much these guys are getting paid. Hopefully, it's enough, or decent. But yeah, you've got to really love wrestling to work in wrestling, and every one of these people that we watched, they do really love it, and yeah, it's just good, man.
Independent like promotion, I think it's all like the live experience I think is so fun, and I think it's a really great way to get people invested in wrestling. Like it worked on Sammy, as you can see, like they're still a fan to this day, and it was because you went and you experienced it live.
Well, that was my first GCW experience, my first live wrestling experience. And I want to dial it back to the beginning of this episode where we have video footage of you during your first GCW match. And we posed the question, you posed the question to me. What was I reacting to? And I need some answers.
Yeah, great. So let's hit the video one more time. Okay, so Sammy, we've re-experienced GCW. We've seen what's in the mix, what they're capable of.
Mm-hmm.
With all this context, what do you think I saw in the ring?
I think somebody came off the top rope. Both wrestlers were on the top rope. Somebody came off of the top rope because they were hit with the saw and they fell down onto a chair.
Okay. I witnessed Orin Fight have a saw put into his mouth.
No fucking way.
And then his head was put into the opening of a chair. And then Sakuda came through and whacked the chair with another chair and went for the pin. And Orin kicked out.
I can't
He wanted to still
believe it.
do the death match, dude.
I can't believe it.
But again, the fighting spirit was there. That was my first ever death match, and I was hooked on GCW ever since then.
Jeez.
And then a few short years later, you saw Tony Deppen get pizza cut, and you were hooked for life.
It really, I think, yeah, I can't. I'm recovering. Don't call on me right now.
Yeah, all right. So like again, I would say the first and second episode, right? Like what made me fall in love, what made you fall in love, like Sammy, what are we covering in our next episode? We're out of stuff to love, or are we?
We are not out of stuff to love. Next week we are covering Kenny Omega and Kazuchika Okada's rivalry. We picked this specifically because we've had wrestling days where I go over to Michael's apartment and we watch wrestling for 6 hours straight. And at the end of our first wrestling day, Michael puts on this hour-long match between Kenny Omega and Okada, and it's such a beautiful match, and we're going to cover their entire rivalry next week.
It is hands down, for my money, it is the greatest professional wrestling match in my opinion. It'd be like my number one of best wrestling matches all time, and they have 4 of them, and we're going to cover their entire rivalry and get into what'll be fun is we'll get to go into New Japan Wrestling, which is yet a different style from American wrestling. So we're going to cover all of that in episode 3.
My goodness. Well, everybody, thank you for tuning in to this episode of Wrestling Academy. It is produced, edited, and hosted by me, Samee Junio, and Michael Klasek.
That's me.
You can follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Wrestling Academy Pod, and send us an email at wrestlingacademypod@gmail.com. You can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts, but if you listen to us and follow us on Spotify specifically, we put up polls and or Q&As every week with every episode, so participate in the conversation that way.
Yeah, and I think something I'd be really curious to know more about, because again, it's like I'm pretty new with indie stuff, so it's like if you know of any long-term storylines that are happening at any sort of independent promotion, we would love to hear about them. Anything you're thinking, like, or just like incredibly insane matches that you could get only at the indies. I would love to hear. Love to hear about that.
Hell yeah. Send those in to wrestlingacademypod@gmail.com. And if you want to check out our website, it is wrestlingacademy.university.
It's a real URL. We really, it's more expensive than you'd think, and we had to have it, and we took it because we commit to the bit.
We committed to that bit. All right, everybody, class dismissed.